Sharlene Lynch, thank you so much for joining me today. Big love heart. Yes, for those of you who are on the visual of YouTube. Look, I really am, let me say a couple of things. So firstly, I'm very excited about today's conversation with you because you're a woman who wears many hats. And I'm also, I think whenever we talk about the wearing of many hats, it can be an adventure. So I am rather excited about today. But firstly, I do want to give our listeners an opportunity to get to know a little bit more about you and what you're passionate about and what you do. So why don't you kick off with telling us a little bit about yourself and what is your mission?
I love it. Well, absolutely positively. My mission on this planet for this lifetime is to raise the frequency of the planet. So I know that is a massive job, a colossal job, if you will, and it's not something that I can do by myself. But what I can do is help enough other people raise their frequency, people that help people. So then they're in turn helping other people, and together we can raise the frequency of the planet. And why would we want to raise the frequency of the planet? Well, we'll be living in paradise when we can raise the frequency of the planet, when we can raise the frequency of our thought and our language and how we behave with other people. It'll be a different world to live in, and it'll be hard to be a grumpy person in the new world because everyone's high vibe.
Right. Well, firstly, I'm going to have to ask you a little bit about what you mean by frequency, because I noticed even for myself, I thought, I'm not really sure I understand what that means. And, I know there are, in the world of well-being and spirituality, and I've read it a lot, right? I do a lot of meditations, and I noticed even in a lot of audios that I noticed that language, and immediately I go, I think I know what that is, but you know what? I don't know. So can you share with us a little bit about what you mean by raising the frequency of the planet?
Yep, absolutely. Well, it does begin with my own personal story, so we will cycle back to that. So we are energy, we are frequency. That's how we are. Our atoms, everything vibrates at a particular frequency. The words that we use have a different frequency. The thought processes that we have a different frequency. And to give you an example, so this has been around for a very, very long time, but low frequency thoughts would be thoughts of blame, shame, and guilt.
Right.
So they resonate down here below 200. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And high frequency thoughts are love, joy, gratitude. They're high frequencies. So gratitude, for instance, has a frequency of 540 hertz. So they can measure it. Yes. So if you're not in a really great place, the best thing to do is to start with a level of gratitude, because that will heighten your frequency. And as you heighten your frequency, you see things differently, you language things differently, you think things differently. So raising the frequency is about raising our own frequency through those things, how we think, the words that we say, and we show up differently when we are at a higher frequency, and we can make a difference for other people when they're at a higher frequency as well.
Well, I certainly know that to be true for myself. I think if I'm so it's a simple interpretation for me is knowing that if I have the experience of being upset or angry, very different in how the world looks for me when I show up and have the experience of being grateful and loving. So thank you for making that very simple to understand. So, but you did say that this does circle back to your own personal story. You want to share with us a little bit about what you mean by that?
Yeah, if I can have some grace and so there are triggers for some people here as I share the story. So September 2011. So I had my own 2011.
Wow.
So September 2011, I was coming home early from a birthday party, and I was a little bit excited that I was sort of sober. Now that was really rare for me because I had been an alcoholic for more than 30 years, and I was never really sober. I started drinking early in the day. I was a high functioning alcoholic, but people just didn't even know. And to this day, there are still people that are still in a state of denial. No, you're just not an alcoholic. You're just that chick that had a few drinks. Yeah. So
Right.
Isn't that interesting? So I'm a fully fledged alcoholic. I'd been drinking 5 bottles a day for quite some time. So we're talking, I was good at it, but I was also high functioning as well. So I came home early from the birthday party and I was a little excited that I was sort of sober, and I wanted to let my beautiful baby boy, my 17-year-old, and I'm still calling him a baby boy, my 17-year-old baby boy, I wanted to let him know that I was home early and also that I was sort of sober and I'm a bit proud of myself. And I screamed out to him in true mother style, but there was no response. So I knocked on his door, and there was no response. And I tried to open his door because I thought maybe he couldn't hear. He's probably gaming, wearing those headsets that 17-year-olds do, and, on the computer just gaming away. And the door was locked. Now, that is really weird because we just didn't lock the doors in our house. It's not the sort of lifestyle that we had. So I knew there was something wrong, but I didn't know what it was. And I was overcome with a fear of, like, a dread. I just didn't know what was happening. So I'm also a woman filled with lots of different anxieties. So all of that came to the surface really quickly. So look, I asked my other half if he could go around the outside of the house and look through my son Scott's window and get his attention. So I positioned myself outside of the laundry so that I could see him as he would walk up to look through the window, but I couldn't look through enough to see my son's room. What I saw was my partner's face. All of the blood ran out of his face and he had a look like he was looking at a horror movie. Now, I didn't know what he could see, but I knew that it was horrid. So I ran to my son's room and I kicked down his door, and that's when I discovered that my baby boy had hung himself on the back of the door.
Oh.
Now, I got his body down and I went instantly and without thought into resuscitation. I didn't even know what I was doing, but I was just doing it. As I busied myself with that, people were calling the ambulance, and 15 minutes later the ambulance arrived, and they came in with their hands fully laden with equipment, and they ushered me out of the room. Now, I hadn't managed to resuscitate him, but I was still able to do the pressure points. I was praying this entire time that they would be able to do what I couldn't do and that bring him back to life. Outside of his room, and time was standing still. My breathing was, I was going to have a panic attack. I'm still praying that they would be able to do the thing that I couldn't do. Time had passed and the ambulance officer came out of Scott's room. Now, he looked at me and he said something, but I couldn't actually hear what he said. The expression on his face told me everything, and I crashed to the ground, still praying that still a miracle would occur. And that's when I heard it. One word. Now, this word was the answer to my prayer. It was not the answer that I wanted, though. A loud, very booming voice, I heard forgive. I thought everybody heard it. I was the only person that heard the word. Now, later on, the ambulance officer said, did I want to go in and say my goodbyes to Scott? And it took me a very long time to compose myself to even stand up, let alone go in to say goodbye. But I did. And I went in and I had some time to process this word forgiveness before I went in. And my baby boy, he's like 6'2", so big boy. And I lied down on the ground and rested my head on his chest. And I said, Mummy loves you, baby. Mummy loves you so much. And I forgive you for your choice. And what I didn't understand at that point in time is that power of forgiveness, that act of forgiveness for his choice, put me to heal at the speed of love. Unique frequency to be in. Now, it took me quite some time to forgive myself. We're talking that's well and truly down the track, but forgiving him for his choice was an instant thing. And so that allowed me to now be at a higher frequency, see things differently and process things differently. Later on that night, while the police officers were there, so in Australia for any suicide, police officers are there for any death as well. And they're investigating everybody and asking questions because there was no note, there was no apparent reason. It's in their mind, suspicious. Yeah. So they're interrogating or investigating everybody, and I'm sitting there with my legs now stuck underneath myself as I'm staring at my giant cup of coffee that's now going cold. And I said out loud, now I really was only talking to myself, but I said it out loud. I know this because the police officer wrote it down and questioned me about it later. I said, I'm not just going to survive this. I'm going to thrive through this. That is what Scott would want. Now, that's an insanely strange thing for a mother to say on the night that her son passes away. It was my inside voice, but I don't know, the filter wasn't working, so it was something I said. And I was questioned later on as to why I would say that. I know. But that being said, now what had happened is I'd made a decision. So having that level of forgiveness for my son and his decision, and now that means I can now make a decision myself. I can make a decision to thrive. Now, I had no idea what thriving would look like because my life was a screaming mess. Yes, my son had just committed suicide, but that was the tip of the iceberg of what lied underneath that it was dramatic. And I'll explain a little bit about where I was at that point. But I just want to share the third aspect of that night. And nobody slept that night, but everyone did lie down in their beds. The next day when I got out of bed, I grabbed a spiral bound folder and I just started to write out what I was grateful for. Now, again, a strange thing to do when you're in that state, but what I did know as a woman of faith, that giving thanks was something that could help me move forward. So I just started writing out everything I was thankful for. And that has now a process that I do every day, have done since he passed away. But the reason why is because that frequency of gratitude is 540 hertz, is high. And then that'll allow you to move forward. Now, some days have not been amazing. And one day, all I had written on the sheet was the sun was shining. You know, like it's not every day's been amazing, but at least I found something to be grateful for every day, and it's a process that I do. I do gratitude in lots of different ways. So those three things are very important factors. The forgiveness, listeners, who do you need to forgive? And is it yourself? Is it your parents? Is it a sibling? Like, who do you need to forgive? And number two, like, what decision do you need to make? And decision is really powerful. Decision means to cut off and kill. That's what it means. The word decide means cut off and kill. You think suicide, pesticide, side means to kill, and die means to cut. So cut off and kill other options. I made a decision to have a life that would thrive. Didn't know what it would look like, didn't know how to get there, but I made the decision. What decisions do your listeners need to make to live a different life? And then raising your frequency with that gratitude. So they're the three things that got me to where I am now, and then through that I've discovered the shift process, which is my 5 steps that got me here. But very, very powerful, those three things.
Well, look, firstly, thank you for having for the willingness to share about that moment, really, because I do, I cannot for 1 minute imagine what it's like to even have to, what it's like to have gone through that, number one. But secondly, also what it must be like to even, as you share about it just, I mean, obviously you've, come a long way since then, but I just am present in the moment to, I did in fact, I share it this way because I was at an event recently. I was a host for a panel on a domestic violence event, and Rosie Batty was one of the speakers. So, and I remember at the end of it, one of the things, it was actually on her son's 10-year anniversary that she was doing this particular event. And I knew that was the case. And in some of the conversations we'd had before the event, she had mentioned that sometimes people are also just not responsible for, this is her life. This is not just an event. This is just not her advocacy. This is her life. And I really valued her saying that because I do think it's a very easy thing to not appreciate when, we're on a campaign to raise awareness and we're on and we get into the advocacy mode. And I just really appreciated her saying that. But it was at the event that, she said it's because it is my life. She said, it may well be 10 years ago, but every time I share this story, it is like reliving it over and over and over again. And no matter how much I've been able to do a lot of work for myself, it's still heartbreaking. So that's why I say, Sharlene, look, it's obviously been a long time, but it's never a long time when it's got to be your own child. And I'm not speaking from experience. I'm just speaking from acknowledging, your willingness to share about that. So thank you so much.
Bless, thank you. And yeah, it is. I always wear waterproof mascara just
Oh,
by
honest to God. I mean, and so the thing that, as you were sharing about it, I mean, I have a 17-year-old son. I've also got a daughter who's 15 and another younger son who's 13. But, there is definitely times. I know there's a lot of talk in the social media, in the media, I should say, at the moment about the impact of social media on children and their behaviours and influence of Snapchat. One particular young guy who ended up taking his life, and his father's now doing a lot of work in this space. But it was only in the last week I showed them this episode, this interview with his father, and sat them down and had a conversation about it. And I mean, he was 17, and I look at my son, and I go, I can't for the life of me imagine you doing something like that. But then I go, Kylie, you can't assume anything. Like, we have no idea what happens for children or what happens for any human being, let alone what happens to a 17-year-old, and why they would ever get to the point where they feel, oh, that's the case. And I go, you know what? I just have to be aware that shit like that can happen, because it could.
Absolutely. And that's the one thing they kept on asking is like, is there anything that you could say that would explain this? And there wasn't anything. He'd just won his under 18s rugby for South Australia. So he'd played against Queensland just the week before. And he was having his 18th birthday the following week. They'd hired the booze bus. Not my favourite place for kids to be, but that's been organised. And yeah, he'd only that night made a booking to have his hair cut. So, like, there was nothing that would have said this would have been something that he would have done. So,
oh my God. I mean, you're a hero, honest to goodness. I mean, I can't even imagine. I think I just the not knowing also, for me, I think it would just send me into God forbid. I can't even, honest to goodness, you're incredible. Look, I want to ask you about something about it. Like that, like you said it many times over, like it seems like a very strange thing to do on the actual day, to be, journaling and have a thought like forgiveness. I mean, that is remarkable. And so I had this question. So is that because prior to it happening, you'd been already doing a lot of work in this space of frequency work or healing? I mean, it just sounds like to come into that like, how did that happen for you?
okay. So that we could spend 4 hours talking about just that question. But just the short version is, let me just paint a picture for the audience about where I was as a human being.
Yeah, great.
At that point in time when he passed away. And that will give more gravitas to the process that I went through as well. That point in time when my baby boy had taken his life, I had been an alcoholic for 30 years. Also, OCD, so obsessive compulsive disorder, to the point of self-harm. So I was not in a good space. I had bouts of depression on and off for quite a long time. ADHD, and I had been all my life, and I still am, to the point of total distraction. Challenges sometimes even leaving the house to get the mail. Like, I had complicated mental health issues and physical health issues as well. I was overweight. I had lots of swelling, edema in the body, things that they just couldn't explain what was wrong with me, but my body was very toxic as well. I also was a hoarder, and I'm not talking about a tiny little bit. I'm not talking about a few drawers messy here and there. I'm talking 33 cubic meters of stuff. That's a lot of stuff. Wow. So I'm a good hoarder. Yeah.
Right.
So there's the picture for you. OCD, ADHD, overweight, unhealthy, a hoarder as well. And my business, which was turning over well over $1 million, I had managed to sabotage it. I'd managed to crash and burn the business. Yeah. So I was not in a good place.
Right.
Yes, I did have some skill sets that I'd acquired earlier in my life about how to think, and whatnot. I was actually a holistic psychologist, so I sort of knew what to do, but I wasn't living it. I wasn't living it. I wasn't living the true version of me. I was living a life that wasn't me, and was filled with addiction and thought processes that were not healthy. So yes, the answers were underneath the surface, but piled on top of that was all of my stuff. Really, that had come to a crescendo, and my son taking his life was the line in the sand. That's it. The life that I was living was no longer going to work. I needed to make decisions, and no question that the answer to my prayers was forgiveness, because that came directly from God. And if that hadn't happened, then the domino effect of me being able to move forward would never have happened, because I would still be in that space that most people are when you go through the death of someone, not just a suicide, or just a death in general, is that place of forgiveness. Like, got all that, should have seen them more, their last conversation wasn't great. Like, there's all of that stuff as well that people carry. So that should give a bigger picture about where I was. And I firmly believe is every single human has what they need to get inside of them to get to where they need to go. They just need usually a coach or a mentor to get there, or some sort of guidance. Yeah. Hopefully it's not a ground shaking experience like I had to have. You don't need to have that level of life awakening. You can choose a different choice. You can make a different choice.
Yeah, yeah. So your business is, so I think you said a holistic psychologist, is that right?
Yeah.
So what is a holistic psychologist?
A holistic psychologist. So we study like normal psychology,
right?
But also, what we do is we study frequency. We also study breath work as well, so understanding breathing and how breath work works. We do lots of ancient technologies like Tibetan pulsing. We also do frequency healing. We do rebirthing, which is quite controversial. We do rebirthing as well. So we go through those processes so that we can be at a different frequency. So I was a holistic psychologist. It's just fascinating is that I was only a holistic psychologist for 6 months because my life was so shitty.
Right.
That I was dealing with these clients and I was getting them where they needed to go, but I was not enjoying the process because everything was a reflection on how shitty my life was.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay, this is not for me. I really enjoyed the journey and now, interestingly enough, I use it now.
Yes.
But I wasn't using it well then. Yeah.
Yes. Well, so what were you doing then, work-wise? Because you said you did have prior to sabotaging it, you had some great success. What were you doing?
So I did have some great success, but for income at that point in time, I was working in a call center.
Oh,
yes. So to pay the bills, I was working in a call center. Now, that didn't last long. It was when I had my reawakening. I started, I don't know what I'm doing. I need to change my life. So I did. I changed everything. I changed how I turn up. And now I'm a world-class transformational speaker, talk on Mindshift, the shift process, the 5 steps, and also talk on body language. And when I'm not doing that, I'm a business coach. So
wow.
I'm and I'm married to the man of my dreams.
Oh.
Living in the house that is literally house and garden. It's perfect. In fact, when I get a lot of interviews, they come here for the videos rather than
right?
in the studio. Yeah.
What are we doing here then? We need to change that one.
Far cry from a woman who is a hoarder with 33 cubic meters of stuff.
Yes.
So you can, if you want to, you can make changes and you can. Yeah.
Let's talk about that then. Let's talk about that. What was the program that you said what's it called?
Oh, the shift process.
The shift
process. So that process is how I got transformation. It's it's what I talk about as a keynote, because it's something that you can talk about in a very short space of time, but it's also a workshop, a program. And it's the foundation of what I work with when I work with wellness practitioners for them to take their intellectual property to the market as well.
Right.
So can I go through the 5 steps?
Yeah, I would love you to.
So now this is what I did to get from where I was to where I am now. Now, aside from obviously the forgiveness, the making the decision and the gratitude, and then I didn't have language for this until well down the track. We're talking years down the track after I'd given up the drinking, after I got the OCD under control, after I got the ADHD under control, after I got the hoarding under control, after I sorted out my pile of rubbish and got life to where it needed to be. That's when I was able to give language to the process that I went through. So the shift process is an acronym SHIFT, and the first letter is S, and the first letter is to see the big picture. So this is the vision forward. What could your life look like? So after I wrote down my gratitude journal, the next list I started was a list of what I wanted my life to look like. And I wrote down world-class transformational speaker. And my voice was quivering, my hand was quivering as I wrote it down. And I was internally laughing, like, how dare you think you can do that? You just even look around the room. Well, you can't see the floor, so how could you do that? You know, stuff. But writing out a list of what I wanted my life to look like enabled me to see a bigger picture. Now, that's a frequency thing. So I'm now seeing a bigger picture of what's possible for my life. You know, think of the 4-minute mile, same thing. He had visualized it before it actually happened. So I saw myself living in the perfect house, married to the perfect man, having the perfect wedding. I imagined all of these things, and that's exactly what's come to pass. So for the listeners today, you know, see the big picture. What is possible for your life if you took the brakes off and you got out of your own way? And it needs to be huge. It needs to be so huge that when you like write it down, you're like, oh, I don't know if that's really, like, if there's not that sense of air, then it's not big enough. Because if you go, yeah, whatever, I can do that, it's just not big enough. So, and now this is what's interesting, and this is what I learned from holistic psychology, is that you need to take stock of where you are. But if you take stock of where you are when you are a screaming mess, like I was, you don't get out of it. You stay in it. But seeing the big picture allows me to lift hope. Hope is very powerful. It also lifts desire. Desire is the thing that's going to change the world. So when we're leaning into this hope and this desire, okay, now I can see some things are possible. Yeah, so I made vision boards, I made videos, I made stuff like I could look at, you know, even on my phone. So that everywhere I looked, there was images of what it is my big picture could look like. The next letter is H, and H is to hone in on reality. So this is where you got to get real. But this is where most processes start. They start with, where are you now? You know, the wheel of life, if you're coaching, all of those things. That doesn't work. You've got to start with a grand picture of where you want to be, because now I'm elated, I'm highlighted, I'm feeling good, and now I can hone in on reality and have a look at this needs help, this needs help, this needs help, this needs help. The areas that I needed help were lots. There wasn't an area that I did need assistance in, but now I can get the right coach, the right mentor, the right person in my proximity to help me move forward. Now, it's not just the one person that's going to fix everything. So I needed to go to a group sessions for mothers that have lost their children. Yeah. I also needed to see a therapist. Yeah. I also needed to see someone about the hoarding. Like, I didn't just have one person who fixed everything. I had people that specialized in particular areas to help me on the things that I needed help on. Yeah. And there was lots to work on. So that's hone in on reality. Yeah. The next letter is I. And I is implement quick wins. For me, this is my favorite letter, because what I didn't realize that night as I'm sitting there watching my giant cup of coffee going cold, and I'd made that decision that I was going to live a life that thrives, is that I had not had and still haven't had a cup of coffee to this day. So that was the last coffee I had.
Wow.
So, but what was interesting about that is when you drink 5 bottles of wine a day, you need 8 cups of coffee to balance it out. And not little cups, they're this big. Huge meals. So, and I was drinking, 8 cups of coffee a day, but that's to balance things out. But in giving up the coffee, it made me go, oh, hang about. If I can give up coffee, maybe, I don't know, maybe I can give up alcohol. Maybe I can.
Right.
So what happens is when we implement a quick win, it gives us a serotonin hit, and it makes us believe that other change is possible. Yeah. So listeners, is there something that you want to move towards? What's a little thing that you could do that could help you move towards that? And so that's it. What it is a 1% shift compounded. That's how you get from where you are to where you want to be. It doesn't have to be this massive leap of faith, this chasm.
Yes.
Set ourselves up every time for failure.
Yes.
Tiny little steps, and then you can reward yourself. Oh, I did good, and then take the next step. You build on that. It builds your self-esteem, it builds your self-worth, and it makes you bulletproof. So
yes,
quick wins. I love it.
I love that one.
That's
love one. Yeah.
The next letter is F. So the 4th letter is F, and F is to focus on the patterns. And this is the magical tool for focusing on the patterns. And that is to write it down. Think it, ink it. So journal, and then re-journal. So do your journal and then go back and read it, which is what a lot of people don't do. Read it and then re-journal that. So now you've got condensed learning. And so I re-journal on a weekly basis, I re-journal on a monthly basis, and I re-journal on a yearly basis. And now you've got condensed learnings that are now your sound bites for information that you can share with other people. So
wow.
I love it. I love it. So journal, journal, journal. Now, the thing
Yeah.
about journaling is really fascinating. Is what will happen is you will start to see your patterns of behaviour. So
Mm,
this was not the first time I'd been in a screaming mess. I've been
yeah.
there before. It allowed me to see my patterns, but interestingly enough, it allowed me to see my family patterns. So I remember telling Mum, I had suicide ideation myself at 38. Now, I wondered whether or not if Scott, my son, had got a whiff of that, an understanding of that's how bad that my thought process was. Had he? I hadn't vocalized it, but had he? And I remember talking to Mum. We were sitting there having a cup of tea. Mum said, "Oh, isn't that interesting?" So herself, I had my nervous breakdown at 38. Oh, okay. So here we are. We're having a cup of tea. I had suicide ideation at 38. My mum had a nervous breakdown at 38. We both looked at each other and go, "Oh, grandma committed suicide at 38." Like, boom. So that's one of hundreds and hundreds of family patterns that we unpacked. But we can only do that if, first of all, you start with journaling it down. And secondly, and most importantly, you have conversations with family. And we don't about the personal issues. But when you do, you'll see that there's patterns of behaviors and these are repeated. So these patterns that you're having in your life might not be your pattern. They could be a family pattern from before. Yeah.
Well, you've opened a can of worms on that one. I mean, every single step I'm like, oh, on the edge of God, I could unpack that one a whole lot more. Oh, I can unpack that one a lot more. But like just on this one, I look, this is gold because I know that in a personal journey, when we're up against the challenges and whatever it is that we are dealing with individually, that this self-blame, one of the things that I confronted was the blame of myself, right? I was like, oh, it's all your fault. If you did this or you had done that, then it would have been different and blah, 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 right? But the reason that this highlights this for me in this particular conversation was because there was a point where I had gone and done some, I always get the EM and the D mixed up here, but some EDMR therapy, which in short is for those who have, anybody who's read the book The Body Keeps Score, a technique that's recommended for those who have had a very severe trauma, post-traumatic stress, used a lot and scientifically written by a guy who did a lot of work on war veterans. But this therapy is recommended as a way to heal because it completes past space, what happens in the moment of that trauma. Now, how did that make a difference for me? Well, one of the things that I learned was that a lot of what was causing the trauma and the experience of trauma was nothing to do with me. It was to do with the environment that I was raised in. It was not my burden to bear. And it wasn't only just my own parents or that environment, but it was traced back to my ancestries. I'm an Indigenous woman and a descendant of the stolen generation. And there is a lot of trauma that gets born out of that history. And it was passed down. And up until that point, Charlene, and you may have a good view about this too, but up until that point, I'd heard stuff like intergenerational trauma and, patterns. But at some point I still couldn't quite intellectually understand how it unfolded. And it wasn't until going through that personal crisis for myself that suddenly I was like, oh, hold on. The way you're reacting right now has nothing to do with you. It is so automatic, but there is a pattern in your family that has it happen. So, oh my God, like that's, and I love the simplicity though that you've brought, I think, in recommending people journal to try to start to get clarity about that. It's really brilliant.
It makes all of the difference, and the rejournaling really is very powerful. And for those of you who believe in past lives, it might not even be a this life experience. It might be a past life, but I do suggest seeing a specialist if it's a past life experience, because that is a different skill set. But there's one more letter to go, and that is the T, and the T is to take massive action.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a recovering perfectionist. So taking action was hard because the action had to be perfect, and nothing was ever perfect. So there would be no action. So I was stuck in this procrastination cycle. So as a recovering perfectionist, I have to say, take massive imperfect action. Just take a step in the direction of this, see the big picture of the big dream. And if it's wrong, it's okay. You can correct. But if you think about it, when you're walking, you can actually just put your foot in a different space. But if you're standing still, you've got to go, well, where am I walking to? Yeah. So having that big picture of where you're going, walking in that direction, and expect that it's going to need retargeting, it's going to need redirection, it's going to need recourse. That's okay. Did you know the trip to the moon, which seems like a straight line when we look at it, they were only on course 3% of the time. 3%. They
Wow.
stayed there. So we only really need to be on course 3% of the time, and the rest of it is course correct, course correct, course correct. But we're too hard on ourselves. So mine is just to take the action, even if it's not perfect, just take the action and then you can correct. But that's the shift process. And this dynamic group and you can see this is the very top of a bigger process and program, because you're already saying, oh, I want to know more about all that.
Yes.
That's what I do with wellness practitioners. I ask them all of the questions, and with my unique skill set, because I'm totally dyslexic, when you talk, I see pictures. So I get to unpack what makes you so unique, what is your value proposition that is different than every other human on the planet, and we integrate that with your story, and then that allows you then to explain to your clients what is the journey they could go on, what do they need to get on that journey, what's the process that's very unique that you talk about, and what's the outcomes they're going to get. So the big four that you need when you're talking to clients. So yeah, that's why I love what I do, because I'm living on purpose and a shining example of how you can stand on big stages, tell your personal story, but still have people walk away with some actionable steps to make their life different.
Interesting segue here. I'm just going to go on to the word that you've mentioned about, the pursuing of purpose. And I know you're doing some work in the area, so in a not-for-profit space as a vice president working with an organisation. Do you want to share with us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, the bits and pieces of my story that I didn't share is I've also been privy to not only family violence, but also domestic violence in all of its shades and variations. And one of the things that I wrote down is that I want to make a difference in that space. I was still living that space, so I didn't know exactly what it was going to look like. But making the decision allowed me to then be at a different frequency and attract the right people into my proximity. That meant the perfect series of events happened. And in 2018, we started Healing Through Love. And so this was someone else's birth chart, like someone else's idea, but I was in the right place at the right time to hold hands and do it together. So you don't have to be the person that starts this. You just have to make the decision, and then you'll get the right proximity. And so together with a very small group of women, we started Healing Through Love. And what it is we get wellness practitioners. So, and they can be, it can be chakra aligning, it can be bars, it can be people that do facials, hairdressing, makeup, any type of wellness activity. And we get 25 or so of them together, and we provide a pamper day for survivors of family and domestic violence. So think day spa on steroids, basically. It's free for them. We also have a little op shop where they can do some shopping, and it's just a beautiful opportunity for women to pay it forward to women. And most of the women that are our practitioners have got a personal story or in their proximity a story, and they just want to make a difference. So they donate their time for the day. And up until last year, it was just held here in Adelaide. And then last year I got a message, think bigger. I'm like, what do you mean think bigger? What, have bigger events? No, think bigger. I'm like, I'm still having this conversation. And then, global. Yes. Okay. So then 2023, we started taking this concept globally and have now connected with women all over the world and have taught them how to run these wellness days, these pamper days in their own proximity. So we're teaching them leadership skills, we're teaching them management skills, we're teaching them how to expand their own digital footprint, we're helping them with their business, and they are in turn helping other women with theirs and holding the space for more women who are going through the healing process. And we've got so many beautiful stories. We've had people that have come as a survivor 1 year and have been nurtured and held in that proximity with these other women, and have come back as an exhibitor the following year. How powerful is that? It's so dynamic, and so you can see how excited I get. I'm so purpose-filled and so driven to just expand this every year to bring it to bigger audiences globally and to different countries. So this year we are doing some work in Hong Kong, which is, that's challenging enough as it is because it's over the other side of the world. Plus we've got other states and other places in the States, in Canada, also the UK, and yeah, like we're expanding as we're speaking right now. We've got another workshop coming up, and we have a series of workshops to educate people about what we do. And if they go, you know what, I'm aligned to this, then we run a series of free trainings. So everything that we're doing is free because our businesses are paying the bills. So we can do this as a free service. Yeah. So that's so gratifying to be able to make a difference. Yeah.
Wow, just remarkable. I mean, I'm like, when do you get time to breathe?
Back from 5 days of belly dancing in Western Australia, I have a good mix. So that's another thing that I'm really big on is work-life balance.
Yes.
So we have date night every week. My husband and I go away every month. My purpose, my passion is belly dancing. So I
Wow.
dance every week. I belong to a mature aged group. So we're called the Stars of the Nile, or quietly the Stars of Denial, because we're all over 50. And
Yes.
dancing, and we dance in aged care facilities. That way we're still younger than them.
I love it.
It's hilarious, and thank God for tenor pads. That's all I can say.
Oh.
Just, so it's not just about one aspect of your life. It's about, reaching for that level of purpose, living life on purpose, and just following the process and just moving forward and, helping others as much as you can where you go. And, when you're playing at that level, good stuff comes to you anyway. And it might come in a different way, but, it's very karmic. When you pay it forward, you get paid forward yourself.
Yeah. I'm just in awe of you, Sharlene. Like, really, I mean, you're such a colourful human being. And I think what has me be in awe is your capacity to be so colourful on top of things that have been so heartbreaking. And I think you are clearly a gift to humanity, because quite frankly, I'm like, God, I wish I had had this conversation with you. Like having you in my presence has just lit my day. Because seriously, I mean, as a woman who does have children herself, I'm like, God, to be struck like that and be able to do what you do and be on this path. What I will say for sure is, clearly, as any human being knows, that any day can present a variety of challenges. But what's obvious, what I seem to see is obvious, is that often those who have had, actually, I was listening to something the other day. It was an interview by someone. I can't remember who it was, right? But it was in a book written by a guy who's well renowned as a storyteller and in the corporate environment. But I was listening to his audio book, and he was telling the stories of these people who are well-known, famous people, but he wasn't giving their names. And it wasn't until the end that I realized, but he was telling the story of Oprah, right? But it was the sharing of as he was sharing the story, what I noticed was the pattern. As those who have had severe adversity, severe is probably not the right word for it, but when faced with extreme adversity, those people do tend to make a massive, massive impact in the world. And I'm like, that is just such a polarity of experience. And so I think there's a really strong message there.
Yes, and I want to encourage people that haven't had anything dramatic happen in their life not to create something dramatic.
Yes.
So have this experience. Know that you've got the power to make that shift just by, making the decision.
Yes.
And living at that higher frequency.
I'm so glad you said that, because, I think even for myself, even there have been things that I've uncovered over the years. I remember when I had my first experience of transformation in 2001, and it was after the Sydney Olympics. And, so we've come off in the world on a big high. And I remember sitting in this workshop with probably about 200 other people. And there was a moment for me that I had that thought. I'm like, holy shit, you're sorted. Like, there's nothing, like, you don't, oh my God, what people are dealing with. And oh my God, and no. And it was almost like I had to really deal with, it does not matter, Kylie, just because what they're dealing with seems to be on a really, like, completely next level in terms of traumatic. That does not get you off the hook from now minimizing the little things, because you still have an opportunity to do something with your life without having that. So I'm so glad you said that. It's just really a gift. Again, you're a gift.
Oh, I love it. You make me smile, Kylie. And I know that every human on this planet has got it inside of them because we're actually designed this way. We are designed this way. And it is about getting out of your own way. It is about getting the right assistance. I couldn't have done this without the right help. It doesn't need to be just the one person. For me, I needed a range of different people to help me move forward because I had a range of interesting things wrong. Well, not wrong, but, at a stage of development that wasn't where it needed to be. And be kind to ourselves as well. That's the biggest thing. We need to show ourselves the level of kindness that we show other people. And when we can do that, we can really live life at a different frequency.
So extraordinary. Oh, I could talk to you for hours. So a couple of things. Firstly, before I get you to share with people how they can connect with you and learn more about your fabulous 5-step process, what I do want to ask you is at the end of every interview, I ask my guests to complete a sentence. So if you could complete this sentence for me. A leader is someone who.
Okay, so a leader inspires and guides others towards a shared vision, a common vision. They make decisions with integrity, empathy, and a sense of responsibility, all while fostering collaboration and working together and very much empowering those individuals to reach their goal. So we have shared goals and heading in that direction, absolutely on every level.
Well, thank you so much for giving us an insight into who you are as a leader. That is extraordinary. So thank you. And so where is the best place for people to be able to connect with you, Sharlene?
Oh, I love it. So Sharlene is spelt with an S, so it's the Irish way because I'm Irish descent.
Uh-huh.
So, and Lynch is spelt with a Y. So you can find me on every platform and you can also find me on my website. But just look under Sharlene Lynch, spell it correctly and you'll find me. I occupy a little bit of digital space on Google and it would be great to connect and reach out. I've always got a masterclass or something interesting happening and it would be great to be in your proximity.
Well, thank you so much. But of course, don't worry about it, folks, if you can't remember any of the spellings, because we're going to put all the links into the show notes so that you can connect and check out Sharlene's programs, masterclasses, and also be sure to check out the Healing with Love. Is that what is Healing with Love? There's a podcast. If you or anyone you know had been troubled or you would like to be a contribution in that space, please be sure to follow the podcast and the work that Sharlene's doing there as well. Thank you so much, Sharlene. It's been an absolute joy. I love you. I love everything that you've got to share in this world, and it's been a true delight.
God bless. Bye for now.